Facebook photos from the 90s where these faces were. I think it was the 90s. They went really hard on the touch up wear. They were right. We did look sick.
Okay, ready? Yep. 6:33, welcome to the Camden meeting. Has shown is off tonight. All the welders are great, so I will be sitting in as acting chair. Select board meetings are broadcast on Spectrum Cable TV, channel 1303, and can be viewed on the Zoom webinar. If you have any comments online, Audra, will you be monitoring the chat? Perfect. All right. First item on the agenda is public comment on non-agenda items. Any public comments? Seeing none, we'll move right along. Approval of board minutes for April 8th and April 22nd. Did everybody have a chance to review those?
So it's August 8th and August 22nd, and I was there on the 8th, but not on the 22nd, so we need to move it on separately.
Okay. Anybody else have anything that they want to point out? August 8th.
I make a motion to approve the minutes for.
Oh, I actually did have one. So on August 8th, on the 6:05 to do with the budget. Topic 6:05. A whole section was missed where Chris made a motion to adopt the budget line of 6:05.1 to change it to the first meeting shall be to deliberate and ask for public comments during the meeting before the board finalizing the annual town warrant.
Oh, I'm sorry, we're on the item 6 from the meeting last.
Well,
August 8th?
that looks to me like the bucket list.
Yeah.
And down further, what we were talking about the budget. So charter 6:05.
Oh, yeah.
So do you see? Oh, the charter. Does anybody have any?
So it's
Oh,
item.
this is hearing charter amendments. So after we get the Knox County Budget Committee.
Okay.
Yeah, okay. Oh, I see what you're saying, 6:05, like of the charter. Yeah, section 6:05 of the charter.
Reorganization of the select
Yeah.
board needs and delivery to the budget to be consistent with the town meeting, warrant,
Right.
public hearing and meetings. I have heard like.
Chris had made a motion to amend that 6:05 number 1 for public meetings. That first meeting, so if you go down to the second sentence, first meeting shall be to deliberate and ask for public comments before the select board finalizes the annual town warrant.
So we're in the charter and the package. Because we approved the order, approving all the
Yep.
changes.
After this was done. So I just reviewed that. So it was at 2:06 in the meeting. Time 2:06 to 2:08 is when we had that discussion.
Okay, so we're getting some audio complaints.
Maybe we should turn off the fan.
Unfortunately, the combination of relying solely on the owl and the heavy fan usage is probably going to be a problem.
Oh, well. Reason to be efficient.
Let's see if this is better.
That's good that you're able to monitor that. I was curious about that.
Not the official way to monitor it.
Okay, so
Complaints to me.
we'll move forward on that. So Chris had made a motion before to make those amendments. So, after that, Sophie, you did make the point that you didn't think that we voted on everything, so then we
Right.
voted on.
Right,
On the order. So that needs to be updated there, and it would have to be updated
Mm.
further down in the
Mm,
charter
in the
for tonight
charter.
as well.
That did make it better.
So
It didn't?
it
Yeah.
did.
Oh, it did? Okay, good.
Yeah. So it would just be the change to, in that second sentence. The first meeting shall be to deliberate and ask for public comment during the public meeting before the select board finalizes the town warrant. That's how that second sentence was.
Does that jive with your memory of the motion? Chris?
It does.
so is that the only change you had on other
Yep.
state? Okay, so I make a motion that we approve the minutes with the change.
I'll second it.
All in favor, or any more deliberation? All in favor? Any opposed? Motion carries. All right, and then August 22nd, since Sophie wasn't here. I didn't find anything in that. Anybody else? Have any?
I was just, it reminded me of the agenda adjustments with the select board reports going first. It had kind of felt, well, never mind, take it back, it was meant to be good. I see it is on the initial part of our agenda, so, looks like we carried through with that, so, but that was not meant to be a one-time thing, oh, look, it's not.
Okay, so does anybody have anything to change or update?
I don't have any, I have no changes.
Move that we approve the minutes
I'll-
for, August 22nd.
I'll second it.
All in favor? You want to abstain?
I can't vote, I wasn't there.
Right.
I didn't even have to.
I think you technically can if you review the minutes and all that stuff, but we could.
We've never
we could
done
ask
that.
Bill
Actually,
to
it
review.
says the copy that I have shows that the minutes of the meeting for August 22nd shows that Sophie was absent.
Oh, yeah, no, I know.
So it's not a change that we need to make.
Okay, so select board reports. Do I have anybody that wants to go first?
I'll go first. I have nothing to report.
Thank you.
Nothing to report either.
The Midco Solid Waste Board of Directors met and we had an initial discussion about two possible contracts for our next waste disposal contract. Right now, we have a contract for landfill in Norwich. We had a representative from Waste Management. We'll talk about that. And we also had a representative from the MRC, which is the Municipal Review Committee. That's the sort of cooperative group of somewhere between 100 and 150 municipalities that collectively bargain. There was no decision made. The way that the interlocal agreement is for Midco Solid Waste, that board of directors can sign up to 3-year contracts without going to all of the select boards. If we were to enter into something, which hopefully we will get to at some point, a longer term contract that needs to come back and be approved by all of the select boards. And then sometimes the select boards then have chosen that they want to put that out to voters, which is of course a long process when it goes through all those layers. Right now, we're not at the point where we anticipate recommending a 30-year contract or anything like that, but there was definitely interest in the MRC seeming more viable than in the past. We had initially been a part of that organization and then we pulled out, and now they have a new funding partner And it's looking like it might be a more viable option. So we've asked for more specifics in the contract, and that's when we can get this in October. And we also approved a small waste reduction grant to the hatchery program at the high school, which is the you can read about that on their website, but it's a program at the high school for innovation, and they do a lot of building education. And one of the things that we did 3 years ago when we signed a contract with Waste Management, instead of paying more to send our trash to Domain, which is technically the more environmentally friendly option, send our trash to Portland, have it incinerated for electricity. The price difference was so great between that and the landfill, and for some other reasons didn't necessarily bear out on the environmental benefit because Domain is already full of waste. So the board made a decision to take the cost savings of going to the landfill temporarily in the short term, but then also setting aside a portion of those funds to support more meaningful waste reduction and recycling. So basically, we're going to do the technically slightly less environmentally friendly option that might have made us feel better, but cost a lot more, and sort of reinvest a little bit of that in our own community. So we approved a $5,000 cleaner so that the hatchery students, they actually built the picnic tables that are down at the public landing right now. They took that wood from the work that was supposed to get taken to the landfill. A bunch of students denailed it. We saved on some disposal costs for that too. And they learned how to make picnic tables and things like that out of it. So it's actually a kind of a viable option for small projects that the community has, asking the high school if they're interested in taking that on. So we talked a lot about that. And the Conservation Commission tomorrow is not meeting here. They will be meeting at the Fox Lincoln Soil and Water Conservation District offices, because as I understand it, there's some revamping going on. This room is not going to be available. So you're going to have to look that up on the internet, the exact address. It's on Route 90. For anybody who's planning on attending. So that's it for me.
I don't have any, so we'll move on to manager's report.
Yes, so there is going to be a meeting with the MTOT Bridge Program officials who are doing the project for the Main Street Bridge replacement early next week. It was rescheduled because our Public Works Director is taking a vacation. And so we're going to, speak with them about, the public meeting that they are scheduling for that project. They just wanted to reach out to us and have an idea of, a way that they could make it successful. One of the things that has been talked about is the River Committee expressing an interest in hearing from the group that's involved in that project to get an idea of the areas where there's sort of overlap between some of the work that they're doing and the impact of that project. So that's one of the things that I'll bring up at that meeting is trying to connect them so that they have an opportunity to just speak to them about their project and get a better idea of what, the River Committee is working on at this stage and how that might be an opportunity to work together. Not the one, it's just, just kind of like a more procedural. These are our timeframes and this is what we need to do and when, and how would you recommend we do it?
Maybe we'll cover this, but how do we involve the businesses that are directly affected with that project?
So that'll all be part of their public outreach and public meeting. And so I'm suspecting that they're going to be asking us for like addresses and, whether this property is owned by, or whether the business that is in there owns the property, or if they need to reach out to a business owner separate from a property owner, things like that. Yeah. So also, there's going to be coordination with the replacement of the water main that needs to take place with the water company. So there's just a lot going on in this small area over, the next couple of years. So it's going to be really important that, everybody is aware of what everybody else is doing and what are the opportunities to, leverage the, different interests to have a project that is most convenient for people. I'm saying most convenient because it's going to be very inconvenient. But how do we do it in a way that's coordinated well? So it's minimizing disruptions and maximizing the ability for people to do other things while there's a lot of construction going on in this very small area. Yes. Yes. Yes, absolutely. And I also thought it would be a really good opportunity during my report to talk about Windjammer Weekend. It apparently went great. This is the second time out of COVID. The first go at it after COVID, it was much less ambitious than this time. I think there was only 9 vendors down at the public landing. This time they had about 17, and there were room for more, which they'd like to do next year because that's one of the things that makes the event really dynamic and exciting for everyone, where they can walk around and, browse different things or get different things to eat. There was great support from downtown businesses, 9 sponsored Windjammers. Apparently, both the pancake breakfast and the chowder challenge that were organized by the Rotarians sold out. There were silent auctions for dinner aboard the Windjammers, which also sold out. And in 2 years from now, it'll be the 30th anniversary of the event. So the committee that's organizing it is talking about trying to do things a little bit differently and kind of reinvigorating the event a little bit, freshening things up as we move into the 3rd decade. I have no idea. I'm sorry. I knew I was going to be asked a question I couldn't answer about this.
Are there any complaints that we get from the business owners about, like, we shut off parking earlier than usual? Did people just like that it went better?
Yeah, I was going to say the event organizers wanted to thank everyone for doing that. It made things go much more smoothly, and they'd like to do it again in the preceding years.
With the business owners around there, is it a good thing for them or is it a pain?
The event itself?
Yeah.
I mean, I'm sure that there's mixed opinions on this, so I don't want to speak for everyone. No.
So for residents in general, they're like, I couldn't find a parking spot all weekend. That place is.
Yeah, it was definitely packed.
Yeah, I visited a couple of times on each day, and I thought it was really nice to see the amount of activity. I like that to do, at least once a year.
Yeah. So just wanted to thank the organizing committee for a job well done. I thought this would also be a good time to dispel a rumor that might be going around about some of the large cruise ships. So I'm not sure how this kind of caught fire and spread, but there was a rumor that some of the really large ships would be anchoring in Camden Harbor. And of course, some concern around that because we're not really set up to take, thousands of or even hundreds of passengers disembarking at once. So I just wanted to clear that up and assure people that they're still anchoring in Rockland. Those who are coming to Camden would be doing so by bus, just like they always do. And, people here are familiar. They go by a coach that's provided by the cruise line, and they get out at the Village Green and they unload them there and go park somewhere for the entire day and then come back and get them in the afternoon. And that's the same plan as always. So just wanted to be very clear about that.
The medium or small sized that were coming before that, I don't know what you mean by enormous.
Like the 1,000 passenger ships, or the, like 500 and over, I would say is a good. Yeah, the ones that go, yeah, those are the.
I just want to be careful about sending a message that we don't want any of them, because for many it was positive. The smaller ones that had like 100 passengers, and are we saying no to anything, or?
No, it's the smaller ones are are still,
Choosing not
I think so.
They're good to walk in the small ones.
So I mean, to me, that's been for a lot of people, a very negative thing. And I've had people say, whatever happened to that? Because we had a discussion, it was during COVID, and somebody from the cruise line spoke, and we had a discussion, different people feel different ways about really any size cruise ship coming, but the result of the discussion was we were saying, yes, that the what they had in place was sufficient, and but then they never came. And
Yeah, I think just having that, they're very sensitive. And I think just having that discussion might have, yeah, we might have fallen off their itinerary.
I mean, that's too bad because that wasn't the intent.
Mm.
And for a lot of people, arriving by boat is a better thing than arriving by everybody having their own car or so. I mean, I would just hope that we wouldn't be trying to send that message, or it could be revisited at some point and somebody could ask them why they're not coming.
Do you get requests by cruise lines to say, can we come to your town?
Yes.
Or is it something that you get those requests or you get those requests?
We usually, we did, we used to.
We used to before
Town.
COVID, not since the discussion that we had during COVID.
So, I mean, it sounds like it's a good discussion item at a different point.
But
So-
it's,
Marketing.
excuse me, it's a disjointed discussion item. If we're looking at having cruise ship with 100 or 200 people and not thinking how we can put them, how we can bring them from the cruise ship to the town. And that's the issue about revamping steamboat landing or having them access the public landing.
Right.
So we really, if we're gonna have this discussion, it really needs to be looking at the access points, the transport, and the periwinkle did it at one point, if I remember correctly, with Levy leading or periwinkle. So it's not just having them, it's organizing so that we can take care of the passengers.
I mean, it was happening before, and part of the reason that caused such a problem with periwinkle was that they stopped coming and all, but there were so many people that still wanted to have that experience of going out on one of these smaller boats in Camden, that all the people had heard about that, and then they were trying to find a way to do it, and then they're arriving by car instead of, so the car method is more impactful than the.
So
So
I'm
anyway,
gonna
so
actually
we don't
put
know.
this, yep, I have it written down. We can have it as an item for an upcoming meeting. And we'll just add that to our list and see where we can put that in. Maybe not the next meeting, but just in the
Yeah.
future itself. We'll let you.
There's no, there's no.
Yeah, and I guess another one that this will probably spark a similar interest amongst all of you is I've been reaching out to the chairs of the budget committee to try to get some, input on the process for this year, because I would really like to have a few meetings before the March meeting cycle, just to have an opportunity to go over a lot of the procedural things, get some input ahead of drafting my version of the budget, and also just not packing so much into those 4 budget review meetings. So I think that with Jill and Sarah's help, Jody and I can come up with an outline of a revised process for reviewing the budget that we can bring to all of you and get, further input and feedback on, and, just set ourselves up so we can try something different this year than what we've been doing for the past, I'd say at least 30 years or so. I think there's quite likely I'll have something, I'd say early October to just give to you to look at and get some input on. Right. Yes. Yeah. You're the member of the select board that was most recently on the budget committee. So yes, any input would be helpful, because I think there is a lot of things that we can do to make it better for everybody, because March is pretty grueling month here, and I don't think it needs to be that way. And then the last thing, and I don't want to sound like a broken record or keep beating this drum, but I really don't want people to forget about the the Knox County Regional Communications Center. We just really need to keep paying attention to that. And I'd really like to ask that any residents who have an experience that they didn't feel like it went well, or they were concerned with timeframes or whatever the case may be, if they could reach out to me or a member of the select board and just let us know, not saying that, we're going to be able to necessarily do anything about it right away, but these are the kinds of things that none of us will know about unless somebody tells us. And I think it's just really important for all of us to keep watching this, to keep being aware of it, because really things haven't changed since the meeting when Ed came and spoke to everyone. We're in the exact same position that we were in before. The only thing that's happening now are that 911 calls are getting routed to Waldo County, where you have to speak to somebody there. Then you get put on hold and you need to speak to somebody at Knox County. And so I think that everybody just needs to be aware of what's going on and keep an eye on it. And we just need to keep sort of pushing for a better solution. Absolutely. I mean, you're all the best points of communication to the citizenry. That's like the biggest responsibility you all have. So, through the people that your networks, how you communicate with your constituents, just asking them to keep sending feedback if they have experiences, just so that we know what is more typical. Because I hear certain things, but it's really only from people who are knowledgeable enough to contact me about it. It's not necessarily, a member of the public who has no idea that this is going on, that might have a bad experience and have no idea who to speak to about it. And that's where you can all help by getting the word out. No.
Like, can we hire auditor to look at the performance and so we have like external validation of what's happening? Because right now, anecdotal evidence, and we can always request the 911 call and time them, but it's a lot of work to do on our end.
Yeah.
I'm also thinking, Camden, we're the biggest contributor, right? We pay the biggest share of the communication center.
Yes.
So our whole town has a massive interest, not only just for safety, but also financially.
Their viability.
The viability, right?
Yeah.
So, okay.
I've had pretty good discussions with people because we have the EMS group that looks at how our towers Northeast honoring their contract. Is there a point where we get that sort of group together for the towns to evaluate how the county is handling this?
Well, weren't we going to have an EMS discussion coming up? I know that the focus was supposed to be on Camden, but
But that's a different discussion.
Yeah,
is
Yeah,
it?
these are two different topics.
the communication center is two different
Okay.
contracts that we have.
The
Alright.
one is county
So-
and the other one is Camden, so it would be,
Okay.
they're
Yeah.
adjacent, but they're not related. I mean, they're related, but they're not.
So how did the towns get together to decide that having an evaluation process?
Oh, for EMS?
Yeah,
Well, that was when we, everything transitioned
Right.
from Camden First Aid to Northeast.
Right.
And I think that was created. And I think that was really supposed to be the intent of the board of the Knox County Regional Communications Center, that they would provide that level of oversight. And I think that, the members of that board have they've been very engaged. They've been very, frank in their feedback. They've been solutions focused, but a lot of them are very frustrated and feel pretty disenfranchised because that board is an advisory board only. And even when they brought up problems and suggested fixes, they just wasn't a lot of buy-in to do anything about it. So yeah, I mean, that's really the vehicle for everything that we're talking about, but there are just so many problems in them being able to get through to those who make the decisions on how things function.
So currently, we're getting updates almost daily from Deputy Sheriff Polky. Should the similar updates be coming from the committee that's supposed to oversee them? The
Board.
A similar,
Yeah, I mean, I don't know what they're, I'm not really sure kind of what exactly they're doing, can do, or, yeah.
They're an advisory board.
Commissioners are
Yeah,
appointed by voting. That's,
Hmm.
wow, okay.
So the best information we get is what we're getting now from the deputy. Okay.
But I think, that sounds to me like something that we should move forward. I'm certainly not getting a lot out of the daily updates. I'm not, I don't know if that's good or bad, or some profession needs to evaluate that, but what I was, in terms of the county and how to engage and provide input, it's, I think they said also that they are looking at the charter right now.
They have a charter commission.
And it just sounds like the most boring thing in the world, but I remember the last time when we were looking to influence something that we wanted them to put in their budget, some regional planning abilities. And the commissioners, I think, had supported that, but the budget committee, which has overruling power, essentially they have a more powerful budget committee at the county level than we have at the town level. There was resistance there, and so it caused me to look carefully at the charter of Knox County. And I mean, they only have 3 commissioners, which is a small number. There were a number of things that they get elected to. I think the budget committee was even longer terms than 4 years, and there were a bunch of things in there that made it hard to make changes. And then some of the people that are people get accustomed, if you're lucky, to paying attention to what's going on in their town. But then it's a lot to ask people to also follow the county really carefully. But they didn't want to hear from, they felt like they're elected independently of us. And so they felt like they don't answer to, the commissioners don't answer to the select board, they answer to the people who elected them. And so
that goes back to all these requests to say, let's talk, let's start hearing from people to find out what's.
maybe we have Darren Coleman also come in. She's our elected representative for this area. We had Ed Glazer, which was nice of him to do that, but she was the person that,
So should we invite them to the next meeting, what you're saying?
Just
I
her.
mean,
Just an update, yeah?
yeah.
From-
maybe I'll mention that it's not just the
Yeah,
dispatch, but to tell us about, we'd like to know about what's going on in the county. We'd like to know about the charter revision process.
Yeah.
Just so we're in a better position.
Who would need to make that request? Us or
I guess.
the town manager?
I'll reach out to Sharon. I think
Yeah.
it is helpful having Tom do it as well, because it's like an elected official to an elected official.
Well, Tom's not here. so-
I can- Stephanie can handle it too.
Do you have another?
Those were my items.
You have an update on, I think there's gonna be some quotes being put together for the maintenance items for the Montgomerys to take a look at.
Yes, and we sent them the quotes and they wanted more information. So we sent more information.
Okay.
They've asked for additional information that I have to put together. So I have to go through past invoices and the budget and that kind of thing. And then we should be ready with an agreement, hopefully by next meeting, but it could take longer.
Okay, so at least we got them quotes.
Mhm.
They needed to see on product. And that's again, probably focusing on those 4 things we talked about.
So yeah,
The
it's been
gate,
it's
the
been pretty
island.
narrowed down because to say this again, we had
Yeah.
already been building a gate. The gate is
Right.
built.
Yeah.
That's done, built, paid for. So the gate's already built. We've got a quote for masonry work in the gate installation, and
Yeah.
we also have a quote for landscaping of the island, and we need to build access out to it because there's just no way to get on and off it as it is now. So those are the 3 things that it's kind of been boiled down to.
Thank you.
It's
Moving along, we'll go to item number 5, which is public hearing for liquor licenses. These are for the Camden House Pizza for renewal of class 1 restaurant liquor license to serve beer and wine on premise at 12 Mechanic Street. We'll take any comments from the public. I don't see any chats. We'll move on to select board.
No comment?
I'll take a motion.
Yeah, I'll move to agree with the Camden's his application for liquor.
I'll second the motion.
All in favor? No opposed? Motion passes. We'll move on to,
So there's just one thing. I'll draw. The expected start date is 10/25/23, the expiration is 10/25/23. So it should be 10/25/24, if you can just, correct that.
I feel like we need a little correction to the motion on
Yeah,
that.
I'll amend my motion so that we approve the liquor license for the Camden House of Pizza with an expiration date of 10/25/24.
I'll
Right.
second that.
All in favor? No opposed?
Hmm.
Motion passes. Moving on to item 6, public hearing for town meeting warrants. So has everybody had a chance to look at this? We can break it up, or we can just dive in however you want to do it. Do you want to dive it up into sections?
But so, correct me if I'm wrong, we've already gone through all the changes, right? There are no new changes proposed tonight. This is just, the only thing we need to do is to amend section 6.05
Yes.
to make sure that it reflects what we said earlier in the minutes, but there are no new changes proposed in this version.
Right.
So,
This is the collective, so if you did want to make a change, this I think is your last chance to make any changes. The notes were added, we had not seen those are often, so it's a public hearing, so I will take any, comments from the public. Seeing none, select board, does anybody have anything they want to discuss, change?
I don't,
I don't have.
So I'll read the proposed amendments to Article 1, powers of the town, section 1.02, town meeting and warrants. Article 6, financial procedures. Section 6.02, endowment fund. 6.05, select board action on proposed budget. In section 6.06, town vote on the budget of the charter, of the town charter. So far, we only have that update to add those few words into section 6.05.
And I've got a copy of the charter up, so this will be the, red line version that's available to the public. Would somebody mind talking me through the exact language, just so in this copy I have it correct?
section 6.05. And
You summarized it well earlier on.
Right.
Yeah.
I know, I was like,
I would give it
So
that.
in this sentence, the first meeting shall be to deliberate and ask for public comments.
oops, sorry.
Before-
Section. Okay,
so we have it right now, the first meeting shall be to deliberate and consider comments received from the public. From the public.
received from the
From the
public.
public. Before the select board. And
we changed it to deliberate and ask for public comment before the select board finalizes the end. That's all.
And ask for comments from the
Ask for
public.
public comment before select board finalizes the annual.
Good.
Yes.
Is there anything else anybody sees? Did you read the notes? Are we all good with how the notes are going to be printed? Those will be right on the warrant articles.
Yeah. I'm not, no, but do I have a manager offered? No, so,
Yeah, I had the same thought. I said, I don't have a better note section, and compromise is the name of the game, so I'm good. Chris, everybody to make a motion?
so are we voting on the
Articles.
whole?
one.
We can,
It's like, there's one that doesn't have the, like, a lot of them already have what the select board, the, planning board recommends, select board
okay.
recommends,
There's
was
one
like
like
voted, but some of them,
Article 3.
so we don't have that for Article 5. So we
Yeah,
need to-
The reason we don't is because tonight's the public hearing for it, so
Yeah.
Right,
once
so
you
we
vote
need to
on
vote.
that,
And then.
Yeah.
approve the warrant, which, And
yes.
another, oh, does that make sense? So
Article 3 and Article 5.
Oh, Article 3 is select board voted.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah. Yeah, it's just 5.
We need to have the.
And then what about Article?
Article 2.
Select board already voted.
It's done.
Yes, that's on the next municipal offices. Oh, that's just certified.
No, but you have planning board recommends and select board voted, so.
Yeah, I just got confused because I scrolled down to the next page and then. When I saw
Oh, yeah.
some kind of. Just a restating of that.
Okay, so Article 5, it sounds like we need to vote on separate. I'll entertain a motion. Anybody else?
Well, should we make a motion to, I'll make a motion to approve Article 5 the way it's written.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor? All opposed?
Yeah, no, I'm in favor. I was just finishing to read the notes, sorry, just to make sure. Reorganize how the select board meets and deliberates on the budget to be consistent with town one public hearing and meetings. So we're good with that one. That's fine.
Okay, well, I'll just, all in favor?
Yep.
No opposed, motion passes.
So, it's too bad Tom isn't here because it's gonna show 400.
That's okay.
It's not gonna show for 1-0.
Yeah,
But
it is.
it's-
Yeah,
The other one already shows 400 as well.
So now I will entertain a motion to pass everything all at once unless we want to break these up.
I'll make a motion that we approve the warrant.
I'll second that.
All in favor? No opposed, motion passes. We have consent agenda tonight. Consideration of renewal lodging and victular licenses for Birchwood Camden, Camden Main and Stay Inn, and the Jack Bar. Does anybody need to pull anything out to vote individually, or are we good with consent agenda?
Is the main statement so?
Mainstay, that's correct.
I will move that the consent agenda is passed. Discussion items.
I'm sorry, Stephanie, on the warrant, I don't want to change anything. I just, want to take the opportunity that we talked about the warrant. A number of people have asked me if, because they're taxpayers in the town of Camden, they can vote in local elections. And I think it would do us a good service to educate people that you have to be a taxpayer. Paying taxes doesn't give you the right to vote. It's declaring Camden as your fiscal residence that gives you the right to vote. A lot of people came to me before the last election and said, I want to vote, because they all wanted to vote on the pot shops. So we can put that up on the town website or make sure that people are educated, because I don't want anybody to make a mistake. We registered in 2 states, which is the United States, or attempt to vote in Camden where it's not the residence. Sorry, Stephanie, just.
They do go through a process when somebody tries to register to vote. Yeah, then where they have to.
Yes. But I think it's also our vote.
Apparently we're having a problem.
I'm delighted that people want to participate in democratic dialogue.
Probably have to do it from the budget first, so that makes-
Okay, we'll move on to discussion items, wastewater, there's multiple agreement with Rockport, there's lots of information in the packet, I know that Audra shared.
And I've got
Bill.
Bill here, and I'm not sure why Zoom isn't promoting him to a panelist, even though I've. Okay, here we go. All right. Yep. Yes, so this has really been the first time we've talked about this publicly for quite a while. And really, that was the fact that it's had to happen in executive session so often was because of the lawsuit that Camden filed against Rockport when they were only paying about 1/10 of their quarterly rate bill. And that, in addition to non-payment of their portion of the upgrades, were sort of the issues that prompted that lawsuit. So since then, there's been changes in terms of the composition of people making decisions in Rockport, and I think there's also been an evolution in the understanding of board members who were there and were part of the issues in the past that have kind of, I think, led to a bit of a shift in thinking, and that's sort of changed the direction that I think that most people thought we were going, which is in Rockport separating from our system and building their own treatment plant. So I think that there's more interest in Rockport in keeping their options open, one of which being staying on Camden's system. So I think that given there's a renewed interest in kind of us working together, I think one of the things that we all need to understand kind of tonight is that this is a long history between the two towns. We've just recently ended a 30-year interlocal agreement. A lot of the issues that caused that agreement to sort of be fashioned the way it is are definitely still relevant to both towns. Camden was concerned about inflow and infiltration and capacity issues. Rockport wanted to have the ability to expand their system over time. Those are issues that are just as relevant to us today as they were 30 years ago. So I think that that's really important, as well as some of the the more current issues that sort of brought us to the point where we're at. It's really prompted this kind of discussion about what are our goals for our system here in Camden, and Rockport's having a similar conversation about what their goals are. I do think, though, that the way that we were both moving, which is Rockport building their own plant and separating from our system, like I said before, that might not be their preferred option. So really what I would like all of you to talk about tonight are two things. So one is immediate and one is more long-term. So the immediate consideration is we're in the first quarter of FY24. We're still billing Rockport at the Camden rate, though Rockport would like to be billed at a rate that we talked about during mediation, where it was the Camden rate minus 15%. That was discussed as part of that agreement where Rockport would be separating from the system. So I guess I'm interested in hearing from all of you if you think that that's appropriate to move forward with for FY24. So that's more of an immediate thing. More of the long-term thing is Bill and I have to move forward in some way with this lawsuit. We have to bring resolution to it. We were working under the understanding that Rockport would eventually separate from our system and build their own plant. However, if there's interest in both parties in that not being the outcome and keeping our options open and them staying on the system, what would this board like to see in order for that to be something that we progress with in our upcoming discussions with Rockport, and any sort of resolution to the lawsuit.
Well, I have some questions, if it's okay. Most Bill needs to fire in a little bit. And maybe, maybe Bill can answer these as he goes, but with the initial lawsuit, from what I understand, there was also a lag in the payment that we recognized. Has Rockport paid what they hadn't paid as of that time? Where there was a delay? Have they paid up?
Are they caught up?
They're not caught up, but they are making payments towards.
Okay,
catching up.
so they're paying. Well, that's good. Is there capacity in place for the projected Rockport continued use with what they want to do in the semi near term, in the next few years? Because we just did some upgrades, right?
Mhm.
Do those allow for that?
Yes, I mean, we're capable of accepting and treating Rockport's wastewater in the volume that we're receiving now.
Are we able to write in anything into an agreement going forward that basically allows them to help us out with capital funding if there needs to be some level of capacity expansion in usage? Is there any provisions besides their current rate that they would be paying? You know, hey, if we got to do something big because of whatever. Personally, I'm a fan of if we've got something and it can be used by multiple groups and we don't have to make another treatment plant over the geographic space of Rockport or Camden, and ours can suffice, why not make it suffice? As long as it's paid fairly and it doesn't, like if we don't come to a point, well, we can't add the trailer park, the mountain, because we added Rockport, and that would be bad. But if we can do those additions that we need to do, they need, if they're going to do some expansion, if there is direct cost to that, I don't know how that gets written in, but
So I do think it's two items here that
Okay.
was pointed out. One is the rate, Camden rate, and how do we want to move forward with billing? I think that goes to your point. And then the other side is the resolution and what kind of things do we want to see? So let's start with that since you had a great intro and just go through with the rate side of it.
Yep.
Do we have any opinions or thoughts on
just a stupid thing.
how we want to move forward? Because Audra, where are we right now with the rate?
Well, I think
How are we charging them?
So we're just charging them the same as Camden. Yeah.
What was the same as Camden minus 15%? Where'd that come from?
So that came out of the discussions around the mediation, but it was all premised on Rockport leaving within a certain amount of time.
So if they stay,
Well, that's what I'm asking you all right now.
So that at this point, I don't have enough information to feel that there's a benefit to Camden residents to accepting Rockport's wastewater at a lower rate than Camden. We, in the past, there's been this complicated formula that tries to pull out the operating costs and the capital improvement costs. In the past, Camden taxpayers paid for all of the capital improvements for the wastewater system, and ratepayers paid the operating costs. And so we were able to portion that out and use that as part of the formula for what we charge Rockport. We no longer do that in Camden, but for years, Camden taxpayers subsidize this. That's why it's a reasonable cost for our users now. Rockport never did that. They never used taxpayer money to subsidize it. So they have exorbitant capital improvement costs that are being paid for by their users. In the long term, I can see getting to a point potentially where there could be a reduced per gallon fee for Rockport based on a cooperative agreement, like we had before, where one of the requirements was like what you were talking about, Chris, where they paid for the totality of designing a chlorination system that was going to be needed at the AU pump station or something. There were some big things that were needed, and so they paid for that part in order to get Camden residents to agree to let them on the system. So in the future, I can see us getting to that point, and had they paid, you know, as a partner, move forward with paying their portion of the upgrades too, you see that as like, oh, they're a co-owner kind of the facility, and so we work with them. Right now, when they didn't do that, I would put them more in the category of like a Midco solid waste, where they're a user that doesn't have a long-term partnership with us because they haven't agreed to pay for part of the, you know, capital costs. So because of the fact that, you know, I know that Midco solid waste, for instance, would like to be charged less than the Camden user rate. We pay about $300,000 a year to make an argument that the water in the waterways is a lot cleaner than some of the, so, but it's easy to tell Midco solid waste, no, you know, the rate's the rate. And I think that for now, in the short term, I'm more comfortable saying, okay, we do at the Ross Avenue pump station, I think there's evidence that we have enough capacity to take Rockport's wastewater that they have right now. But in the interim, until we develop a long-term agreement that we know we can say, you know, this really benefits Camden residents. And so this is why it's, you know, we want to put out the voters through the whole 9 yards. Right now, all we have is the knowledge that we do occasionally have exceedances at the actual treatment plant, not just the Ross, like the Ross Avenue pump station doesn't, but we have on a couple of occasions exceeded our permit at the treatment plant. So we think maybe that can be worked out, and hopefully it can. We've had a little bit, you know, too high levels of a few things. There is stuff coming out of that pipe all the time that is legal for the most part, but people still complain about it. So to me, the benefit to Camden residents right now would be taking Rockport's wastewater at the same fee that we charge in the Mechanic Street in the short term, and just like we do to make a solid waste and all that, and then working toward a conversation about what we want to see in a long-term treatment.
I agree. I like this position because I think there's no real benefit for the Camden user, rate user, to subsidize 15% of the rate for Rockport resident. There's no rational, there's no justification. I mean, they don't give us any kind of service, and certainly they don't pay on time either. So I think, you know, good time gets rewards, right? That's my position. So I agree with you, Alison, for the time being, happy to take the capacity to fill up the capacity as we have it at the same rate as Camden. And then once we start, you know, planning for the longer term, we will do something.
And also looking at it right now, the agreement for the interlocal agreement has 150,000 gallons a day from Rockport. That's where it starts to get into the question of, I am not sure if I can answer that question about, do we have the capacity? Does that, because that's dry weather. So then you look at the wet weather, and I'd like people to look more carefully at the total, you know, for the longer term, how much is it okay that Rockport expands their system before it affects us? And I want to do a detailed look at that.
Yeah. And I have another question. So when we have these massive downpours, they tend to overrun the pumps, and Rockport has the same downpours that we have. Is that something also that we should be talking about into the long-term planning? Because those rain patterns are massively influencing how the wastewater treatment plant is working because of I&I issue that both Camden and Rockport have, right? So also something else to consider. I don't want to dive
First, the dry weather flow.
Exactly.
For the dry weather flow.
I don't want to dive into that rabbit hole today, but I think it's something we need to better understand to get basically we need to better understand how all those things work and are influenced by weather patterns and additional capacity before we can make an offer to Rockport, basically.
Right. I mean, I would personally like to see some kind of a committee, perhaps, of some Rockport people and Camden people, or to do, the interlocal agreement actually that has now expired, talks about potential, or economic potential, a committee that never really formed, because it was kind of a dispute resolution, setting the rate sort of thing. But there is this need to talk about like all the, details of some of this stuff.
There is a informal group that already kind of gets together and brainstorms about, and they are from Camden and Rockport. I'm not opposed to that, but right now with the Camden rate, do you feel like you have enough to?
Yeah, I mean,
So
I
and
guess-
it would be an annual agreement,
For the rate?
For the rate.
Yeah, that would just
and we'll
be,
review it.
that's just to get us through FY 24.
Okay,
I guess the four of you sound like you're in consensus that until there's something long-term, you'd like it to stay at the,
Right, and
Yeah.
are we also in consensus that really don't see a reason to force Rockport to have its own plan? long term?
no, we're not in
Right
consensus
now,
at
I
all,
think that
No.
they're
no.
still in that discussion, but in the short term, we are
Okay,
talking about where we're moving on to that. So with that said, Chris, we'll move into the other part
So-
of the, so we kind of
Yep.
dealt with the immediate rate.
yep,
We'll go into what kind of items would we like to see in the agreement, just brainstorming for Audra to take back and work through and,
I guess I would like a little bit more time to process some of, a lot of the information in the packet. I don't know, I don't think it was there like right away. I'm actually thrilled as I was looking through, like, we have to figure out how much the Ross Avenue pump station can handle. But I think we do need to have more of an understanding also of where we stand with our DEP consent agreement, where Camden was found in violation of many things, and some of the board members weren't here for that. We did the $10,000 initial thing where we got away with building a fence at Aldermere Farm. And then if we don't do certain things by a certain time, then we pay more. But we also hired peers to do an evaluation of our weak points. And I like Chris's question the last time around, which was like, is that contract finalized? Is that, I'd like to be able to have a better understanding of where we are with some of that, just so that we can answer the question of some of our stuff can be separated from our problems, but to be able to answer the question of capacity of the plant itself, and also whether we need to take into consideration future rules for either PFAS or nitrogen. I think our permit, the actual permit for the town's wastewater treatment plant, it's a 5-year thing, and that's now. I just want to make sure that we have the overview.
yeah, I think maybe part of the solution in what you're looking for. I saw in looking at the charter that there's supposed to be an annual meeting of the wastewater commission. And I don't know if it's the commission, the commission shall determine at its annual organization meeting the rules and whatnot. And I don't know if we've ever had such a meeting, but maybe since it's there, that is one of those meetings that we should have to go through that information.
Well, we used to meet separately as well, quasi separately as wastewater commissioners. It's like you run for the select board and then you're like, oh, congratulations, you're also a wastewater commissioner.
Right.
And then it would be the agendas would be we'd adjourn as select board and reconvene as wastewater commissioners. And the charter committee, we recommended getting rid of that. I almost think that has been a positive thing, because it would just serve as a reminder to everybody every so often that, oh, right, oh, we're this. We're missing, now the organizational meetings are combined, but we don't remind ourselves.
Yeah, but every time we talk about wastewater treatment, we act as water commissioners, so it's.
Sure, but we don't talk about like, how are we gonna, as a group, how do we want to be informed about the wastewater treatment plant?
So-
You forget that you know,
It sounds like it's like one organizational annual meeting, and maybe, I know our agendas, our discussions go long enough on the select board. That maybe we should try to find a way to put back in that annual organizational meeting
of the wastewater.
of the wastewater commission, specifically about that. And that way we could have input from others, including the people who run it on a day-to-day
Yeah,
basis.
it would be
It's a-
great to allow them to have the spotlight to say what's working, what's not working, what future goals they have.
An annual tour, maybe. We could meet over there.
Yeah, that's right. Yes.
I've been on one tour of it that was not me just saying like, I want to go over there, can I?
Right.
But that was scheduled as an elected
It
official.
was scheduled,
It was,
for the whole select board and no one showed up.
there was
So-
that one time.
Yeah,
I mean,
okay,
but-
whatever, I mean, it's great, but if you wanna make it, you know, organize it, we have to stick to it and we have to commit to it. I mean,
Well, it could be, you know.
Okay, so
Basically,
that's
we
what-
obviously need more, sometimes more information about how the whole thing works, so we can make better decisions. Otherwise, we should be outsourcing the whole thing to people that are. So some method of finding out more things
the one, so
makes
what,
sense.
so one of the key things I wanna learn is what I basically want an Excel spreadsheet that shows me what additional capacity the wastewater treatment plant can absorb in the next 10 years. So imagine that we have a massive growth spurt, you know, lots of people move to Camden, build new house, whatever. How much more people can we put on the system, or how much more gallons of water can we put on the system? Because my concern is that having gone through an exercise of upgrading this plant and seeing, I mean, the timeline is very clear. The time it takes to get from planning, budgeting, engineering, building, we're almost, this wastewater treatment plant is almost out of date. If you can, yeah, almost, because if the town keeps on growing, if Rockport keeps on growing, if Rockland keeps on growing, then we don't have a lot of additional capacity, and we need 5 years or 3 years at least to upgrade it. So that's long-term planning, so if I. can
Well,
have
okay,
this
I mean,
projection-
here, let me, so all of our plants, Rockland's a different story.
I think some of Rockport's-
Right.
That's why
I mean, I'm just
adding
saying
it
they're a
to-
different story, but our plant was built when there was a lot more industry in Camden than there is now. So our capacity issues stem from our I&I issues. It's not because of the amount of development or the amount of users or whatever we have. Like our ability to accommodate more growth is very much tied to us getting a handle on our I&I issues. It's not anything other than that. Yeah.
I know that question a lot because you would think that it's the following issue, so that's.
So it's more Pearl Street, like,
That's right. And honestly, that's the solution over time. That we do that again and we do that again, and we do that again.
I equate it as the Pearl Street, not the blame, but
Yeah.
taking care of another street, whatever the next one is in the list.
Right. And we just keep chipping away at it. And that is what's gonna get our arms around that problem here.
We haven't done it so extensively where we basically said, oh, well, the laterals are all private property, so we just don't mess with that. But that strategy has kind of run its course.
Right.
Because water gets in that way, so we have to be proactively looking at people's laterals, and then if they need help with the replacement, then doing it, but.
Right. And also, you all making decisions like you did when, we said, okay, well, we just need to replace the entire pipe because it's just not going to work if we try to
Right.
keep out like we've done in the past, and I mean, and there's very good reasons why that decision was made over the years, but everything has a lifespan. And I think it served us well for 100 years, but we're at the end of it now.
So for me, there's a long term. The capacity issue. Tackling the I&I issue seems to be kind of priority number one. But also putting Camden rate users first. Like, if you have to make a decision, if there's a fork and a four, I'll take the Camden fork, but to be clear. So I think that's basically my bottom line.
Yeah.
I don't have anything
And
else.
I do want to say this because I do think it's a really important point,
Right.
and they haven't gotten enough credit for it. So Rockport has made a tremendous effort in finding some of their biggest sources of I&I and remediating it. They've done a lot since it was probably at its peak, which was when their rates were at their highest. So they did prioritize that. They did do a lot of work to address some of the, the major contributing factors to that. And that sort of led to, the cost of us treating their waste going down because there's less of it, because there's not all this fresh water that they're sending over to us. And also that, that's helping with our capacity issues as well, when they're able to send us wastewater instead of wastewater mixed with fresh water.
But
So.
another point is whatever line we do on the annual process, make sure that we stay on, and make sure that we stay on top of daily usage or volumes, or contamination of what's also. So it really needs to be based on much closer collaboration with Rockport. Whoever is on those select boards between us and Rockport has to be. It's really putting an asset together for the benefit of the whole community. And so there needs to be sustainability of the process, and make sure that we have some way of monitoring that we stay on top of it.
It sounds like those are things, all those things should be part of that. We go back to having that annual meeting, to have that annual update, as you mentioned, the annual review process. It's a great time to do that. And our reason for the meeting is to go over those and projections and significant maintenance items.
Although, if you look at what we're right and what we're wrong in the last 30-year agreement,
Mhm.
all of the things that they're basically all the same issues. And it was that we were going to get additional revenue from Rockport, and we're going to use that to fix Camden's I&I problems. I saw ads in the newspaper that said, this is a win-win. We'll stop having overflows at the Bayview Street pump station because we're going to have all this money. The deal was supposed to be for every new gallon of water from Rockport that came into the system, we would be eliminating 2 gallons of Camden's I&I. And people go, okay, great. Well, what got me when I started to look at all of this, and it was only because Rockport stopped paying their bill, but it really started to be like, okay, well, hold on, how much water are we getting? I said, can we say with a straight face to Camden residents that worked? That by taking Rockport's wastewater over all these years, we were able to put Camden in a better position with the I&I stuff, we're having fewer overflows, all those things. No, the answer is no, nothing is better because we assumed we were going to be able to fix the I&I. And we may need to look at, okay, planning for a future where we assume we keep trying. I want to keep really trying, but we should at least try to prevent the overflows and figure out, okay, we can't say we can take 150,000 gallons of Rockport's wastewater because we assume we can fix all of our I&I problems. What's been the biggest motivating factor for Rockport to get rid of their I&I is that they have to pay for every gallon of it. Whereas all the Camden homes, we all get billed based on our water bills. And so it's the amount of water coming in. We don't get billed based on what goes out because we have no actual way of measuring that. So our rates we don't have a way of charging one person more because they have more I&I, but Rockport having to actually pay that made them really double down. And so I hesitate to have an agreement that relies on elected officials just paying more attention. It's wanting to put something in there that almost is its own incentive a little bit. And the only one other thing I would add is we need to consider is there's been a lot of talk about, okay, well, one thing that's really different about Camden is we have this pipe that discharges right into our inner harbor. And Rockport and others have quickly discovered that that wouldn't be allowed now for many reasons, because stuff does come out of there. Sediment, we have to dredge the harbor, mercury, all of these things that we, so there's been talk about, okay, we should look into extending the pipe. Okay, well, if that may or may not be realistic, but another thing along those same lines would be, basically things in the interest of keeping Camden Harbor cleaner, even when there aren't overflows, just like what's coming out of that pipe. And if we could look at evaluating how feasible that whole pipe extension plan really is, and then also other options like tertiary treatment for the water there. So we, other places that have no other choice but to discharge into a river, for instance, have to go through a higher level of treatment and just cleaner water that comes out of the pipe. So that might be, in my mind, something that in the long term, because I'd rather not have another pipe in Rockport too. I like my kids swim over there. Why have multiple harbors that we're having a discharge to? But if it's all going to come to Camden, are there ways to make it cleaner in the long run? And maybe that could be part of Rockport's capital. But the problem is all this. So
Well, it's just a matter of having the capital, enough capital somehow, whether it's between us and them, to make sure that we've got as clean water as we can. And I thought that's also why we had the camera thing that was talked about a couple of meetings ago, that they're supposed to go out and take views of, and hopefully that's progressing. So that we can identify what's the next big thing. Is it that, the sewer pipe by Mr. Willie's candy shop overflows during a rainstorm? What's driving that? But we got to find out the next big thing to get rid of. But as it relates back to Rockport, though, right? I think long-term strategically, of course, we want to reduce our I&I from both locations. And if we can have capacity and not have to build something else.
Does this create any extra questions for you about?
Oh, I mean, there's a lot, and we all, I mean, all of you know this, all of us on the operational side know this. There's a lot of, investigation work that still needs to be done to pinpoint exact areas. We know generally where the areas in our sewer shed where there are problems, but it's figuring out exactly where those problems are. And, sometimes the greatest benefit for solving I&I issues doesn't match up with other capital planning priorities that we might have. Like, there might be a road where we've got some real drainage issues that we need to address with our stormwater system. And yes, we absolutely can chip away at our I&I problem, but it's not going to have the same benefit as if we went to another area where maybe the drainage issues aren't as much of a problem. So these are all kind of the things that we need to sort of talk about holistically and figure out what are the trade-offs when we're doing our capital planning. Because focusing on I&I and our sewer collection system and upgrading that is really, really important. However, it's in the roadway, and there are other priorities that move things up and down over the years. So it's all, yeah.
So what do you need for us to make a decision or providing the recommendation that move forward or agree that we withdraw our complaint? What do you need from us? What are the steps? Can you
Start with the time frame that we're on? Where are we in the mediation process?
Folks, did you, I'm having a hard time hearing you all. I'm not sure what's going on with the owl. Audra comes in really well. Chris next, and then after that, it's hard to hear you guys. But were you asking me, Stephanie, to comment on something?
Yes, so your time frame that we're working on with the mediation, And then Sophie wants to know a little bit about what you might need from us to move forward, one way or the other.
Yeah.
Well, listening to tonight, you guys are talking about a lot of policy issues and political issues in terms of how they're going to interact with Rockport. And so it's hard for me to comment on that, because if I equate the legal process with what I might call the dogma of this situation, and I think about you all and the political process as the karma, well, my dogma ran over my karma here, or my karma ran over my dogma, depending on the day. Of what are we focusing on? Is it the political process of finding resolution, or is it the legal process? So that has sort of stymied us a fair amount in terms of moving things forward, because we have all of these overlays of planning and these issues that you're all just describing. Shortcut that to say that currently pending is a motion that was filed by Rockport in court to keep everything in the status quo for another 90 days while further discussions take place. That has been filed, and Audra and I have talked about that. We have now filed, that is either the third or the fourth, because of various delays. And then when we went through the mediation process, that was given some time to percolate as well. And we delayed things until the end of July, but they weren't quite ripe yet to further discuss. So it's been a lot of sort of delay, because the discussion seems to, in this case, take an awful long time to progress. And no one has wanted to forge ahead in the litigation process to get to depositions and discovery and things that really start to get to the meat of the issues, but cost time and money, because there still seems to be some desire to work it out. A fair amount of desire to work it out. And I would just add this one comment about the issues you were discussing. I don't want to negotiate in public, but we did in the mediation process really focus on equities, and we were driven by things that were fair. And everything from the Camden side flowed from that concept. And there are a lot of rabbit holes to fall down into, because there's a lot of different kinds of data here and a lot of different ways of looking at it. But that's really what drove us for some of those points you were talking about earlier about what's the Rockport rate going to be going forward until we resolve this. It was a bunch of equitable issues that we were looking at.
Allison has a question for you.
So I think also, getting back to what would be important to me as a next step would be resolving, this all started with a payment issue. And so being able to move forward with what a shorter long-term agreement looks like, to me, involves settling the payment dispute first. So, we our local agreement expired, they're being treated like a customer. And that I don't want to go down a long road of looking at all the details of a future agreement until we can say, the reason for the lawsuit was that we did get paid, and ideally we can just resolve that and because we'll have been paid, and then we can move on with all of the rest of it. I do think that that's a little bit messy to combine all of that. So knowing, I heard Chris's question was really the perfect one at the beginning, and we heard a little bit of a vague answer that they are working on it, but knowing, is there an agreement that says I guess that's what I'd like to say.
I guess they're trying to settle up based on, like I said before, the sort of agreement that came out of mediation that is premised on a discounted rate and a discounted payment. That's, leads to them eventually exiting from our system. So that's kind of, and I guess this is really important. I just want to be really upfront about this. They are laser focused on getting a discount. That is the end all be all with them from a lot of different discussions we've had. Maybe as a group, their thinking has evolved a bit, but I don't think it has because I was asked and they budgeted based on a 15% discount. So I think all of you need to be very clear as to whether or not that's acceptable or unacceptable to you at this point in time. Because that's, like Allison said, this is all premised around a payment dispute. They're,
For FY 24, how much will it matter to have a 15%? How much would it hurt Camden to have a 15% discounted rate? If on the one hand, we're getting paid 85% versus going through litigation, 85 is better than nothing.
The question, excuse me, the issue is every time you give them a discount, the rate users are subsidizing this discount, not the taxpayers, not the general fund, not the town. So that's the fairness.
Yeah, we've done a little, we're mixed that up just a little bit by some of these projects that we're
Yeah,
doing. That's where Rockport has been laser focused since the beginning of time on making sure their taxpayers didn't pay a dime of this. And their wastewater bills actually include a bunch of things that are their budget. It assigns a portion of the town manager's time, a portion of the codes office, a portion of the public works director to charges that to Rockport wastewater users. We do not do that in Camden. We've all expressed kind of a desire to start moving more in that direction so that it is user funded. But we've not done that because it would mean more of a hit to our users, which we're a little bit uncomfortable with. Rockford is experiencing rates that are high enough that it's making their users very upset. And so their response, Rockford's response to that has been to look at their budget and figure out where they can cut. And what they did was they looked at it and they said, you know what, I can go pay Camden about 10% of what they're charging us. And that was how they handled it. And then they just started paying us a lot less. So this has all been a negotiation like that. That's what I'm not willing to do. I'm totally open to negotiating a long-term agreement that can be mutually beneficial to both towns. But at this point, Camden users, Camden taxpayers, starting in 1969, got on board, did all of this stuff, invested heavily, taxpayers invested heavily over the years. If Rockport wants to cut their user fees some because they think it's too high, they can use some taxpayer funding to do that. They don't need to be setting their own at Camden. The quicker we can resolve this and they can get up to speed on what they can build, then we can move forward, hopefully with an agreement that could contemplate a reduced rate based on some capital expense sharing or whatever else. I just think if we start to go down this discount, because as soon as we make the argument that it might not be that detrimental to Camden, then we're also making the argument that it's really not that big of a difference to them either. So
I always wonder how much of the deal, and obviously 50% is 15%, but how much of the bill that they had owed has been paid? Is that public knowledge?
oh,
that's a good.
I mean,
we
it,
have a spreadsheet that might do that, but I think it's
Yeah. yeah, I think that's a really good question that I'm not prepared with tonight, but I do have that information.
But I think
I know you said-
yeah, because basically, so what if I understand correctly, what you and Bill are saying, so if we don't agree to the 15%, they're not willing to look at a long-term agreement.
I don't know. I don't know if that's true.
Okay.
I think that I feel like it's been very clear from all of you, and I think that this has been really good, that you really want to separate the two things. The short-term underpayment from the long-term agreement. And it's really, really hard because we've been mixing them in together throughout this entire conversation. So this is kind of my takeaway, that I'm going to go to my Rockport counterpart and just say, it's going to be impossible for my board to talk about a long-term agreement where you stay on our system while we are still disputing this, sort of underpayment issue. And they're not really interested in talking about a discount for any of that, into FY 24, FY 23, FY 22, because we hadn't negotiated a new agreement where there was any sort of mutually beneficial, moving forward of sharing expense or whatever the case was. So that's right. 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 So yeah, in order to reinstate enough sort of goodwill and trust amongst everyone, we just want you to settle up with your bill and keep paying the Camden rate into FY 24. And if we all can get on the same page again, then we feel like you're in good standing that we can talk about a long-term future. Is that a good summary? Great.
Yeah, I'm sure some of them will watch the meeting, but that we could also say, we did talk about the long term, there is willingness to talk
Right.
about the long term.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yes. All right. I think that's super clear. Bill, do you?
How do you feel on the dogma and the calm? You got it?
How's your thought?
Well, if the karma's coming on stronger here, it just, I'll leave a couple thoughts. There are several issues that complicate this discussion that are too much rabbit hole to talk about tonight. But keep in mind that the user fees are based on a budget. The budget in Camden is operational, but it also includes capital improvements that are just Camden capital improvements. And so that is an issue that we'll just have to address as time goes on. But as I mentioned earlier, we tried to look at this in terms of equities and what had happened over the last 30 years, based on one other premise, which is over time, Rockport had paid a proportional amount of infrastructure improvements when they were joint improvements. In other words, they benefited both towns. But Rockport paid for its own improvements within its own town, and Camden paid for its own improvements within its own town. So one of our little rabbit holes here is looking at the fact that when the wastewater superintendent comes up with a budget, the budget includes pure capital expenditures in Camden. And if that's how the Camden rates are established, all well and good. But it's just one of these things that's going to have to be factored a bit in terms of going forward, in terms of what are the equities and what makes sense. And we have 30 years of history of how some of this works, but it is way more complicated than that with the way it's been billed, the way it's been calculated, and all kinds of other things. So I don't want to go into rabbit holes. I'm just saying, keep your minds open as we proceed.
Right. And I guess to fill in Bill's point without getting too without going down there too quickly, the 15% was, it had to do with Camden only capital improvements. And that was just a shorthand for 15% or whatever's greater, so that we didn't have to do the back and forth as to, is this just a Camden thing, or is it a Camden and Rockport thing? Because there were some where they wanted to well, is that excavator payment going to benefit Rockport? Stuff like that. And we didn't want to go back and forth. So the 15% was shorthand. So I guess the way that it might be necessary to keep your minds open is that if we have any specific Camden capital improvement projects that are in the wastewater budget, those do get subtracted for this.
But it shouldn't be billed as a discount, because every time you do a discount,
Yeah.
oh, I'm giving you a better price, but for some reason that is,
Yeah.
I think, we should have a fair price with them that is reflecting of their usage of our infrastructure. I still also believe, I don't want to go down this rabbit hole, but we build a whole infrastructure, and whether they use all of it or none of it would be a very long discussion. But I don't believe that we can segregate, we only use 92%. But anyway, I feel that clean slate, paying their bills with the rate, that we set, not the rate that they set, because it suited them. I don't call it TNT and tell AT&T I'm gonna pay you $10. But that doesn't, AT&T.
Wouldn't that be nice?
Would that be nice? So that's fine.
Yeah, so
So all of those things that Bill just mentioned, sure, they absolutely, they pay for a portion of the Rosslyn Avenue pump station upgrades. That's, because of all that, because of the agreement that we had where capital expenditures were shared and negotiated through all of that. I personally don't feel as a Mechanic Street resident right now that I am really benefiting all that much from Pearl Street upgrades. Now, I don't request to have that deducted from my bill. Midco Solid Waste could make, which is paid for by, we're sending bills. They, Midco Solid Waste sends a bill to Hope and Lincolnville, Midco Solid Waste pays the Camden rate. The thing is located actually in Rockport. It uses only a portion of the infrastructure. They also don't care about what's happening on Pearl Street. So I think that you're right that the whole previous agreement was based on this, like, well, what's fair? But the infrastructure belongs to Camden. We're dealing with the same thing with the trash right now. Eco Maine came from a bunch of communities in the Portland area, got together, finance, their taxpayers, they own it. Lewis and Auburn, they have an incinerator. We just tried to see if we could, like, can we jump onto your thing and get a rate that's less than what you charge somebody that just shows up at the door? Well, no, they're not doing that right now. They're allowing community like us to take our trash there. They're gonna charge us what, essentially the gate rate, not any kind of negotiated lower rate, because, their members realize they invested and now they need to get a return on that. So I don't think just because, it belongs to Camden and that we don't have to give discounts based on anything that the Camden residents don't think is fair. So
I think it's fairness, not a discount. So I'm sorry, Stephanie. Yeah. But it's really looking at what is the actual bill that Rockport owes us for their usage based on operational budget, I guess, and not the capital expenditure. And put the capital expenditure, no, put the capital expenditure, the 1.2 or 1.5 million dollars, that's a separate one.
oh, that's a different thing. So that's the whole.
Exactly.
So I'm actually
So-
going to kind of
Talk about the Camden rate.
put it down at this moment, because I think that we are just kind of going around in circles and spinning low at this moment.
I'll leave you with one thought though. So in getting sort of the lay of the land with all this and trying to figure out, okay, how close or far are we outside of the norm of these types of interlocal agreements in the state of Maine, where there's, treating communities and sending communities, and what do the agreements look like? How normal or abnormal are we? And I can tell you this from Maine Rural Water doing a survey, and also having an independent consultant look at our interlocal agreement. This is sort of one of the things that became clear to Bill and I, is that there's no normal. There's no normal. It's done so differently across the entire state, and it's really dictated by the treating community. Like Allison is saying, if you own the infrastructure, you've invested in the infrastructure, it's in your town, and your ratepayers, taxpayers own it and are responsible for it. You set the terms of allowing communities to send their wastewater in. So that is the one big takeaway that I got from some of the background research Bill and I did in preparing for all of this. Bill, would you have anything to add to that?
No,
I guess it's just to keep in mind with moving forward with a new agreement.
No, I agree. And if I throw out another rabbit hole, without going down it, there's a lot of non-reflected costs that Camden incurs that are not part of the wastewater budget. With Audra's time, the finance director's time, there's a bunch of things as well. So the equities are they're complicated. But I was just bringing up a couple of them. But there are more rabbit holes here, and we could go on and on. The devil's in the details of a lot of some of this stuff.
So I think that we've given enough for you guys to chew on and to take back to everybody and discuss. Does everybody feel good about that?
You do.
Does anybody?
The big schedule from Rockport would be nice to.
Yes.
We did talk about maybe wanting to set a November or a wastewater commission meeting. Is anybody wanting to do that right now, or do you want to push that off a little bit?
That can be a priority and for Audra to come back with making sure that we can have a meeting where any professionals that should be there or need to do some reporting to us, such as, Greg Pierce or whoever else, so we can have a substantive conversation with some background information ahead of time. And that you could look at that and say, okay, this is who we would need to be at the meeting, and but I definitely hope that that could be a priority.
Reestablishing a template for what an annual meeting should be and when it should be.
I actually think that that annual meeting that they refer to is more of like our select board organizational meeting, which, so I'm a little concerned about that as the template, seeing that we.
That's fine. We can-
But some kind of, I'm less concerned about.
I'd really
A
love to
treasurer.
do, I was talking with Steph, like a 101 meeting.
Okay,
So it's not, like it's for not just the benefit of the commissioners, but for the community, just saying, this is our system.
Yeah.
These are the sewer sheds. This is, if you live here, this is where, when you toilet goes. That, I think that would be really helpful because, there's a lot of people who don't know. Why would you care about that as long as it's working?
This
So
is
I-
what we know and we don't know about the
Right.
problems.
Right.
So what I would be really helpful is, or let me know if it's helpful, is if each person kind of sent like 2 or 3 bullet points, topics that they would want covered. in the
Right.
meeting
Or,
like that.
questions, like there's a lot of capacity issue questions. And I think, some of you have kind of broad questions, but others have
Right.
more specific things that you're interested in. So yeah, that would be great.
It would be good to, because like Bill said, there's so many places we can go.
Yeah.
And I want it to be useful,
Yeah.
not just. So.
Right, like a lot of my stuff is kind of like, I just love the topic, and so I can get it, I don't want to necessarily take everybody's time in the meeting. Some of that can be like, okay, we just did Allison report, but
Yeah.
it'll be easier.
So we'll just move on now to the discussion item, disposition of tax acquired property. Who's taking this one?
So I'll take this one. I'm glad Bill's here for it. I didn't necessarily tell him that this was on the agenda, but it's good that he's here to chime in and correct me if I'm wrong. So I included in your packet a guidance memo issued by MMA about a couple of changes that have really sort of impacted the way that we need to sell or otherwise dispose of property that we acquire through a tax lien. And this is relevant to us because in February, we became the owners of 3 commercial condos in the Knox Mill, which all of you are aware of. And one of the reasons that there's been no movement on doing anything with those was because around the time that that we acquired them, Bill was aware that there was a case in front of the Supreme Court that was going to be heard. That was, it's a little bit different in that it's in the state of Minnesota, but they had very similar laws to the state of Maine, where any proceeds from the sale of property that was acquired by municipalities through tax lien foreclosures could be kept by the municipality. And so in this case in Minnesota, it was a elderly woman whose residential condo was acquired by the municipality through tax lien foreclosure process. And the municipality sold it and then kept, I think it was $20,000 of proceeds from that sale. So, that worked its way all the way up to the Supreme Court. And I don't know if any of you are familiar with any of the more recent properties that the town has acquired through tax liens, but 20,000 is quite a small amount of proceeds to end up going up to the highest court in the land for. So anyway, so that decision was made. So it was very clear that if it applied in Minnesota, it was likely to apply in Maine as well, because it's not in terms of being able to sell them to be able to pay for the back taxes and holding costs and anything like that, but it's the actual equity being returned to the owner of record. And so that's the guidance from MMA, that proceeds being returned to the owner of record. At the same time, the state passed a law to put in place procedures around what municipalities had to do to dispose of tax acquired property. And as is very, I guess, on brand for the state legislature, it's just adding another layer of process that doesn't really align with the reality of how we do things. Very heavy on, so that the thing that we had to do was Bill sent a letter to the owner of record on August 1st saying, we've acquired your property through tax lien, now we intend to sell it. And so they have 90 days to respond in some fashion. And the default is that once that 90-day period is over, we can finally list it and put it on the market. And sorry, the default process is that it goes through a real estate broker. A lot of municipalities don't necessarily use real estate brokers. They'll do some sort of like bid or, other process to get rid of committee. Yeah, maybe they never sell it. You never know. So anyway, that's kind of the situation that we're in with those condos down there, is we're, like a month into that 90-day period. Bill, do you have anything else about any of that you think is important for them to know?
No, I asked several specific questions to MMA after the state statute was passed, and frankly, they're waiting for it to evolve. There's a lot more uncertainty than certainty, but just leave the board with this weird concept. The statute requires that we give a foreclosed owner notice, and they have 90 that the fact that we're going to sell the property, and they have 90 days to just tell us if they want it to go through a listing process with a broker. One of the questions I asked MMA was, why do we have to wait? Why can't I just do this now? Let's just list it and go through a commercially reasonable listing process. And MMA's opinion was, we don't think you can do that. The statute says the owner has to have given notice and they get the opportunity to say yes or no. So there's this unreasonable 90-day delay built into a process by giving an owner just the option to say something that we could start automatically and protect the owner's interest by using the sale process through a realtor. So just gives you a little flavor of the statute. It's a bit frustrating, and it is it's going to evolve. That's for sure. And it is prospective. It looks towards the future. It does not try to remedy anything that happened in the past.
And so another part of that statute was they created a study group to look at all these sort of unanswered questions that are gaps in the Supreme Court's decision, as well as that current piece of legislature, the current legislation. And one of the, in the study group, when they say through, legislative action, there's going to be a study group that it contains a member of a peak body that represents all municipal interest in the state, and somebody who's an assessor and represents all assessors. So Kerry Leishman, I told him about this. He's like, would you like me to volunteer? And so he reached out to the person in the statute who's in charge of creating that group and said, if you haven't appointed an assessor yet, I'd love to be your guy. So I think Kerry's on there.
He also treats another level. Sorry, doesn't that statute create another level of complexity with the state law that owners of over 65 years old can put a cap on their tax?
No.
So it was stopped. Was it? No.
It's a different statute. Yeah, that's not this statute.
But I can see like a lot of, sorry.
That,
I'll have a
none
conversation.
of them had that as their primary residence, and there was no like elderly person that was living in the.
We're gonna have more, yeah.
Oh, different things. Yeah.
This was the LePage one from the elderly disabled veteran whose house was taken through tax lien foreclosure, and they created this, it's like a reverse mortgage thing. Yeah.
So do we have any incentives on this property? That's the question, right?
Not financial.
Financially, it's not gonna be.
No financial. So I guess, there's a couple of things to think about. So, and this is all no man's land because we don't have good guidance on it. There's a chance in the coming years that we're going to need more space for municipal operations. So you might want to consider that's right across from public safety building. So that might change your thinking about it, given that You know, we're not gonna get any proceeds from the sale of these things.
But we also won't have to, even giving it to somebody that is gonna create something positive for the town and pay the homeowners or the condo association fees is a benefit, you know, they're raising looking at as a benefit to Camden.
Right, yeah, where it's the benefits to the town are going to be not direct financial benefits from the sale. It's going to be more of the broader community benefits. That would be very nice, because then we wouldn't end up doing this again.
Maintain the building and not have the town have to pay for that.
Well, for the homeowners association.
You know, a whole last minute workshop.
Yes,
So
we
is there
could.
any more updates on that you need?
I just want everyone to be aware of the reason why this hasn't been listed and isn't moving forward. It's just been layer and layer of federal and state regulatory changes.
Also,
No,
we didn't quite say it from our testing.
no, special deal.
All right.
Yeah.
Well, I'll move along then to the last item on the, well, other than.
Thanks,
adjournment,
Bill.
but yeah, thanks, Bill.
Thank you.
Thanks, Bill. A few items that have come up tonight that I'll make sure Tom adds to his list. And, anybody else have any upcoming meeting topics that they want added? You can tell us now or email for upcoming, whenever.
For the cemetery commission. There's
Now, does anyone remember when is the EMS?
October 10th.
Okay.
Yep. So October 10th is our last, scheduled one that I see.
Okay. Yeah.
So, all right, Allison makes the motion that we adjourn. Anybody have a second? All in favor? No opposed? Have a good night.
I like that you have the agenda that you have for the initial report.